has everything changed? Okay, that may sound a little bit dramatic, but hear me out. Hello everybody, I am Jmulls of Jmulls Gaming. And with 2024 coming to a close, Atlus had an absolute banger year. The release of Persona 3 Reload would make for a great year just by itself. But Atlus didn't stop there. They put out Unicorn Overlord, Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance, and none of those were their biggest release of the year, because that honor, that distinct privilege, goes to Metaphor Refantazio, which not only blew away my already high expectations going into it, it's arguably my favorite overall game Atlus has ever put out that I've played. And now all eyes are onto the future, namely Persona 6, their next big heavy hitter they haven't technically announced yet, but everyone with a working brain knows is coming at some point. And we don't know if it's going to be coming in 2025 or 2026, like my sex life. However, I think if you ask a lot of people, especially fans of Persona, before 2024 and now leaving 2024, what they want out of Persona 6, I think that list would be very different to one another. So I put a call out to my community. I wanted to hear your hottest takes concerning Persona 6, but also your wishes and just what you want out of Persona 6, and we have some really interesting points to discuss here, with 5 overall topics I want to go into. Okay, it's mostly 4, but it'll make sense later on, and I want to start with one of the takes that I saw the most in my comment section. I'm not saying this is representative of some greater whole, just it's something interesting that I picked up on, because I also kind of agree with it, though I don't know if it would be healthy for Persona 6. So, first up we have at Blazzy2293, though also to be fair, like I said, quite a few people also said this one. We need the press turn battle system. Talking fire emoji, absolutely. Metaphor Refantazio, I think, changed the name of the game for a lot of people who were used to the way Persona did things, because it introduced the press turn battle system from Shin Megami Tensei that maybe a lot of Persona fans just haven't been experienced to. I played a little bit of SMT5 back when it first came out on the Switch. I bounced off of it then, but with Metaphor Refantazio taking the press turn battle system, and for those who don't know what that is, it's the combat system from Metaphor, where essentially, instead of each of your characters getting a designated turn, you get a group of turn icons, and you can spend those resources depending upon what you have each character do, and it cycles through your characters until you run out of turn icons, in which case control of the game goes over to the other side. Passing a turn may yield half a turn icon. In Metaphor Refantazio, utilizing a synthesis skill may utilize 2 or even 3 turn icons. Hitting enemy weakness may grant you an extra turn icon, same with critting, or if you miss or get your attack repelled or nullified, you lose turn icons, multiple of them. It can be really punishing. It's a system that is extremely simple on the surface, because it kind of is, but it just works, and it's fun, and adds a great level of strategy that is easily understandable, but allows you to really try and manipulate each fight to your advantage, to where it's no longer just about hitting enemy weaknesses as ad nauseum, because you're not only trying to land your own hits, you're trying to make sure that the enemy misses theirs or gets repelled. For instance, there's a character in Metaphor Refantazio where when you unlock their final archetype, that game's version of Personas, but not really, they gain an ability where whenever they dodge an attack, the enemy loses all of their turn icons. That is an extremely powerful move. But it's a bit random because you have to have that character dodge an attack. I elected to go for Hulkenberg, who's a tank, who at some point unlocks the ability to put on a shield that just blocks any attack an enemy may try and utilize. And sure, it may not waste all the turn icons of the enemy, but it's consistent. And just in that one decision, you can augment your battle style to suit your preferences and what you value. Little decisions like that are all over Metaphor Refantazio, and also in Shin Megami Tensei, because I've been diving into SMT3 Nocturne, which also utilizes the press turn system because, well, it comes from Shin Megami Tensei. Now, I did mention before, those with a keen ear may have picked this up, that I said it may not be the healthiest move to implement the turn-based or the press turn system into Persona, because at the end of the day, like, yes, Persona was originally a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei, it is its own thing at this point, with its own audience. And while personally speaking, I do tend to enjoy the press turn system now more than typical Persona combat, so if Persona 6 did adopt the press turn system, I personally would be happy, but I don't know if that same logic would apply to everyone on the whole, or even the majority of people who are Persona fans. Maybe most people wouldn't care at the end of the day. It's an interesting discussion point though, and the safer bet for Atlus is probably to preserve the combat loop and style that has worked for them for over a decade at this point when it comes to Persona, because that is kind of the identity of Persona. It's interesting to think about, and I would love to absolutely hear you guys' thoughts on this subject in the comments down below, because this won't be the last time in this video that we address Persona's combat. But I think it's time to move on to the next take, and I think right there alongside the comments I received about Persona 6 implementing the press turn icon system, this next take was right up there. And I'm gonna shout out two people for this one. We have at Fubuki the Icy King, who says P6 needs press turn, shout out to that one, and at least a choice for female protagonist. But we also have at Bola Dragon, who says we should absolutely have a female protag at this point. I agree. I don't think the female protagonist should be the only protagonist. What I think they should do, though, is give the player the option to play as either or, like in Persona 3 Portable. It's another one of those situations where it's kind of like the press turn system, where, but not really for me, where I personally would like the press turn system because I've been really enjoying it lately. Likewise, when it comes to RPGs on the whole, I tend to prefer playing as male characters. It's easier for me to immerse myself in a character the closer they are to me. It's not a requirement for me. Hell, Nier Automata is my favorite game of all time, and I absolutely don't look like 2B, at least to my knowledge. My ass is way fatter. However, it is an RPG, and that same, logical thought process that I just used there for why I play as a male character can easily apply to other people who just want to play as a female protagonist. FemC from Persona 3 is really popular, and especially in an RPG series that is all about forming connections with others, and having your player agency in terms of who you hang out with and what level you raise up each character to, I can completely understand why a lot of people out there would want to play as a female character. Whether or not that's because they just simply identify with female characters more, or they just prefer playing as female characters. It's your preference at the end of the day. And outside of when it comes time to make the manga or the anime adaptation, which I don't think should be a consideration for what mechanics should be implemented into the game, I don't see why Atlus shouldn't do this. These characters are largely silent protagonists to begin with. A lot of other RPGs give you the option, and it's also, Persona's done this before with P3. It's one of those situations where a lot of people will probably feel indifferent just because it doesn't affect them. To me, it boils down to, there's probably gonna be two main groups of people. Either Group A, who wants to play as the female character if they are given the option, in which case that's a net positive for them if a female character is an option, or you have Group B that just doesn't care or would just play as the guy, so having a female protagonist route wouldn't affect them. I don't see the con here. One of my biggest issues that I had with Persona 3 Reload was the seeming lack of effort in certain key locations, like not adapting all of Persona 3's content across its multiple versions, one of them being FemC. And you have people making entire mods of Persona games to implement a female protagonist. Just do it, in my opinion. Okay, now for the realest take of them all. Everybody, strap yourselves in. Put your helmets on, because we're going deep. We have at Jordan Ronaine 7867 coming in to preach absolute gospel with Persona 6 should be a live service multiplayer third-person shooter. Can I get an amen? With loot boxes for skins, of course, naturally. Most of the characters are familiar with firearms. Hashtag God bless the USA. The P4 team can learn. Nanako and Ken are out there in the battlefield cranking 90s. And they're going to be the meta since they have the smallest hitboxes. Absolutely god-tier observation there. Either that or do the Scooby-Doo Persona meme, but unironically. Look, with the way they've milked Persona 5, I need them to milk Persona 3 at least. We need Fortnite to have actual verifiable competition, because Apex Legends ain't it, chief. We need Persona, I guess, 4 and let's call it Arena because it's a shooter. Wait a minute, that already exists, but it's a fighting game. What we need is also a battle pass that lasts a week that you can't get back. It costs $50 each week and requires 48 hours of game time to grind out fully. We need Call of Duty-esque skill-based matchmaking, and I need annual refreshes like it's an EA Sports game. It's in the game. This is how we save Persona. This is how we also save Makoto. It's all coming together. We've had a required joke for the calendar year, so now we're going to a bit of a more controversial one, potentially. We have at The Real Miso Soup, who says, I really hope that they make P6 its own thing. With the release of Reload, a lot of people have been speculating that they might bring Makoto back, since Elizabeth has been working on that. Also, with the Savior parallels, people were also theorizing that he might rise on the third day, aka the third game after P3. I really hope this doesn't happen, as it undermines Persona 3 MC's sacrifice, the themes of death in P3 as well as the identity of P6. Here's my thing when it concerns this, and I don't mind being in the possible minority in this opinion, because I'm also right. Now that's a joke, but still, hear me out. I would agree with this idea if the answer/episode Igus didn't exist. Because to me, that is what undermines original P3's message. Look, I know we like to meme about the door thing. It's not my favorite plot detail in all of Persona. I think the story and the theme of P3 would have hit way harder for me if the end of original P3 was just the end. I do really like having the story of episode Igus when it concerns the rest of C's coping with the death of the MC and working their way through those residual issues. I really like that element to it, but they already did kind of bring him back by making him the Great Seal, and they've already kind of continued that storyline a bit with Persona 4 Arena, because like as that comment said, Elizabeth is working on a way to bring back or save the soul of MC Makoto, and this is absolutely completely subjective on my part, like 1000%, but this is a plot detail that to me, I don't like being the end of a story. I like it being the continuation leading into something else. I thought the original ending to P3 with Makoto closing his eyes and all that to be one of the most beautiful endings I've ever seen in a game. It's so well told and well executed, and it's also very poetic, but not in like an artsy, pretentious way, just in a very beautiful human way. But I also agree with the idea that it is really hard to stick this landing if the idea is we're going to save him. Like, that is going to be a really, really, really hard storyline to land. I think it's possible if the theme of the game or the story in which it does happen is life, almost serving as a counterpart to P3, which was all about death, learning to cope with death, prepare for death, accept death, but then live your life to the fullest before death. If you do a Persona storyline, kind of like the other side of the coin to that, that's all about life. Choosing to live life on your own terms, living life to the fullest, stuff like that. I think there's a way to make it work thematically in terms of bringing back MC. Because there's another element to this that I think some people ignore when it concerns the Makoto Messiah theory. That being Makoto's final persona that he unlocks being Messiah. The whole 3 days after, 3 games afterwards he comes back. Us saving Makoto may not necessarily entail that he lives, just he doesn't have to be the seal anymore and is able to move on to the afterlife. That is a storyline that can also work very well, again, depending on execution. I tend to default to the idea that there's no such thing as a bad story beat, just really, really, really bad storytelling. Obviously, you can always have examples to counteract any rule like that. I tend to find, though, if you're going to go for something like that, you need to tell it well. And not good is not good enough. You have to tell it excellently. And I think Atlas is capable of doing that, but when you have a storyline that is cooking for this long, because remember, P3 came out in like, what, 2009, if not before? Might have been like 2007 or something for the original P3. I googled it. It's even earlier, July 13th, 2006. When you have a storyline that is potentially cooking since 2006, that may not be fulfilled hypothetically until 19, if not 20 years later, you have to nail that landing. It can't just be adequate. It can't just be average. It can't just be okay. You have to nail it. It has to be excellent. That is a really tough thing to do. I'm optimistic, but I understand why a lot of people would be hesitant. The foreshadowing might be crazy, because the first take concerned Persona's gameplay and the press turn system, and I said we wouldn't be completely done and we would revisit the idea of Persona's gameplay later in the video. Well, the time is now, people, for the final wish / hot take for the video. We have Zenado22, who says Persona 6 should revamp elemental weakness, or at least make them less of a free win. Persona loses 90% of its challenge when you find an enemy's weakness and then proceed to keep chaining attacks together. Xenoblade reference? And the enemy no longer has a chance to even move, and then all future encounters with that same enemy end extremely quickly because you know exactly how to take them out. It's getting to the point where combat becomes almost trivial for most of my playthroughs. Okay, let's unpack this because I do kind of agree, but I also disagree in certain regards. I think I lean more towards agreeing though. I think there's something we do have to understand, and that is, compared to Persona and Shin Megami Tensei, I think it's safe to say Persona is not so much focused on difficulty in terms of the dungeon crawling combat experience. That is fine. That is not necessarily a bad thing. It just means its priorities are different. And depending upon what you want to get out of your gaming experience, that will probably color what series you prefer. Now, I also do kind of agree. I think Persona needs something else. We talked about the press turn system before. I don't know if Atlus should just make all their main series that are turn-based RPGs just closer and closer to Shin Megami Tensei. I don't know if that is necessarily the play they should go with, but it is a thought I also tend to have when it comes to Persona games. That is, the further and further I get into them, one, the easier they tend to become, but also the combat becomes a bit stale for me, and it ends up feeling very samey to me. This was most readily apparent for me back in Persona 5 Royal, just because of how powerful the one more mechanic was, because you could upgrade that thing. So every fight just felt like, hit the enemy's weakness, I can swap out my party members, so no matter what they're weak to, I can always have an answer that fight. And then just chain together my one mores for a bunch of damage and MP generation, and I don't have to worry about anything else. And every fight kind of felt like that, and when every fight in your game feels like it boils down to one algorithm, it can feel really samey, especially when your game lengths go as long as Persona is known to go for. I think it's one of the reasons I really like the press turn system, because you retain the benefits of attacking enemies' weaknesses and all that, but you still retain the strategic elements that come naturally with the press turn system, because you don't necessarily get to just pass your turn off to the exact character you want. You have to strategize with who goes next. Do you want to pass your turn? Do you want to capitalize using that specific character? How do you want to go about doing this? It's a small thing, but small things add up quickly. Again, I don't know if it's the smart play or the right choice to just implement the press turn system or some variant of it into Persona, but I do think Persona needs something else, and I think they're almost there with Theurgies with Persona 3 Reload, because I love Theurgies as a concept, because what they managed to do is add individuality and character expression in the gameplay, where each character feels unique and individualized depending upon how you build up their Theurgy and what their Theurgy does, because it feels representative of that character. And they can even implement character development and just little set pieces in the Theurgy attack, namely with Junpei summoning Chidori. It's not only beautiful and poetic, but it looks really cool and feels uniquely Junpei, like a culmination of his story. I think if we have another mechanic kind of in that vein, where the exact execution of the new system is dependent on the character and utilizes that character and this story and just, well, the character to feel unique and to add that player expression and character expression in the gameplay, I think that's the direction they should take. I think they should retain, assuming we stick with the Persona combat system and don't just SMT it, retain the one more system like how it's executed in Reload, because I don't think it feels overly powerful there. Iterate on the Theurgy system, and honestly, maybe the play is just implement synthesis skills from Metaphor Refantazio in some way into Persona, because that could really work. They almost kind of did it in P5 Royal with showtimes, but I think showtimes are just kind of bleh. They feel RNG and just do a bunch of damage, but I think having a mechanic like synthesis skills or showtimes, but you iterated on it more, where you can have multiple characters in your party interacting with each other, I think that could be a great direction they could take. So with that, I think I'll call the video there for the day. We've had 5-ish wishes/hot takes concerning Persona 6 and where we might be headed and what we want out of Persona 6. Let me know what you all think in the comments down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have your own opinions? Let me know in the comments down below your own wishes, your own hot takes. I'd love to hear them and possibly react to them in a future video. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe. Have a great day. If you liked the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Bye bye everybody. Until we meet again.